Good evening and welcome to the Porch broadcast. I wanted to cover a subject today that I think would be helpful to most everybody as far as cleaning up the way we think and maybe changing our attitude in a better way. Let's just go ahead and enter into the porch talk, and the subject is going to be good people and bad people. And I want to start out by saying this. When we watch the news today, for the most part, all we hear about is the bad news, people fighting, people arguing with each other, cities burning down, wars and rumors of wars, and just all kinds of very negative things. And it's easy to get lost and get under anxiety and get to feeling hopeless. And I think that we need to reevaluate the world that we live in, look at it in a different light than what we're looking at it in. And you may say, well, Paul, those are things that are really happening. They are. And here's a thing I want to say to you on that account is they've been happening for as long as I can remember. I'm almost 70 years old now, just turned 69. So I'm going on 70. All the years that I've lived through the Vietnam War, my stepdad was in World War II, and I've seen economical collapses, droughts, you name it. I've seen a little bit of everything. I mean, I could spend half the evening here just talking about the bad things that I've seen in my life. So this is not uncommon to us. I think the measure of the whole thing is exactly that. How do we measure these things? Now, having said that, I want to move into a conversation I had with a fella just recently. I got a phone call. I was sitting and drinking my coffee the other morning, and a guy from, I believe he said he was from Michigan. His accent sounded like he was from Michigan. And he had a little bit of business that he and I need to tend to. And I want to say this, I never met this guy before in my life. So we didn't know each other. And the business we needed to tend to only took somewhere around 3 to 5 minutes to accomplish it. But an interesting thing, he and I were on the phone with each other almost a half hour. And I kept thinking through this whole conversation, this is just weird. I don't know this guy, and yet him and I are just talking like we've known each other all of our lives. So we talked for about a half hour, and let me tell you what we talked about. We started out talking about the snow we had here in Arkansas and how it was a little bit out of the ordinary for at least this part of Arkansas. We had about 10 inches out here where I live, and so we weren't to where we knew how to get around good in this. A lot of people had two-wheel drive. Now I have a four, but two-wheel drive people just weren't going anywhere. And my four-wheel drive struggled a little bit in places. So it was a little bit out of the ordinary for us. And we got to talking about that. He got to talking about the snow that they have up where he lived, and they have snow up there where vehicles just don't move in and out. He said they actually have to use snowmobiles in that area. He was telling me about how him and the neighbors take snowmobiles and put sleds on behind them and take them to town and get groceries for themselves and other people and bring them back to their community. I thought, well, that's just a really nice thing to do. I like hearing stuff like that. It was a long way to town, and one of their neighbors owned a big piece of property there, and he came over and told them, he said, hey, why don't you guys cut across my property? He said, you could save about 5 miles if you do that on your trip. And he said, all I ask is just keep the limbs trimmed out where nobody will get hurt going in and out of there. If you guys do that, I'll give you free right of way across my property. Well, there you go. Now there's another neighbor helping the neighbors that are helping everybody. And we talked. I told him a couple of stories about things that happened up here, good things. He told me a couple more, and we just went back and forth. And I'll bet he and I together probably told 12, 15 stories about good things people were doing. Here's what I took away from that, at least initially. I took away from that, even though they were in Michigan and we didn't know each other, we're all the same. We're just people. And I want to point this out for those of you that may not like America. That man I was talking to was American. I'm an American, and I'm proud to be an American. And I'd say if I asked him, he'd say he's proud to be an American. Why? Because that's the way we live. That's the way we do things. Okay, now we could go into a lot of different things in that area of the subject, but we're not. I want to stay focused if I can at all. Anyway, we talked and got off the phone. I went ahead drinking my coffee and listening to the news. And I've been hearing nothing but how bad the politicians in California have been on these wildfires and stuff. And I think a good lot of that's probably legitimate. I don't know enough about it to really voice my opinion on it. But you hear all the bad things, all the people blaming the politician in California, blaming somebody else is blaming them, and it's just back and forth. And people's houses burned down. This is serious, man. And all they can do is figure out how to blame each other. And I thought about all of this, but something came on there that really caught my attention. They interviewed an old gentleman. He was probably in his 60s, maybe been in his 70s. He stayed behind. He didn't evacuate the place to where all the houses were burning. He stayed behind and took his water hose, just a garden hose, and he soaked his house down, the trees around it, and got it to where he could keep it as safe as he could with no more than he had to work with. Well, consequently, because he stayed and did all that, his house didn't catch on fire. Now, there's something even better than that, if you can believe that. But because his house didn't catch on fire, the neighbors alongside him didn't catch on fire either. Because let me show you how those fires work. Those big trees get on fire, and I lived out there for several years. Those big trees get on fire, and that fire get hot, and it heats those houses up, and they combust. Well, that house gets on fire and heats up the next house, and it combusts. Just a big chain reaction. Well, when he watered his house down, he stopped that chain, that fiery combustion chain that would have burned the rest of his neighborhood. So this old gentleman did a good thing. He was very humble, just talked like, well, that's just things you do. You just do what's right. And I thought, how refreshing is that? And then they interviewed a family. It was grandfather, a father, and a son. And they pre-prepared. They had 2 swimming pools full of water. And they had a big gas pump. And what they did was just pump their house, got it wet, got the trees and the lawn and all the stuff wet, and saved their house. And then, because they were that kind of people, they didn't just stop by saving their house. They started going down and wetting the roofs down on their neighbor's house and keeping them from burning, and saved several of the neighbors' house. What am I saying? That's good people. Now look, we hear about all the bad people, and we don't hear a lot about the good people. We need to be shining the spotlight on the good things people do, at least some. Now, most people get the idea because they listen to old newscasts and stuff like that, and they get to thinking 80% of the people in the world are bad, and maybe there's 20% that are good. But I'm a little bit optimistic about that. I don't believe that to be true. That's not what I see in life. I'm going to say that the 80-20 rule puts 80% good people and 20% bad. And if we will look at things differently and start thinking about, what can I do to help my neighbor? What can I do to do what's right? What can I do to help my coworker? What can I do to help those in my family? You can be part of that 80% that's good, and maybe that 80% goes up to 90% or 95%. And then we just have 5% bad people. Wouldn't that be a better world to live in? Yes, it would. Okay, guys, this thing is about bad people and good people and the way we look at the world. We can look at the world in a very negative way, or we can look at the world in a more positive way. I'm not saying look at it as if it's perfect, because that's just simply not true. but look at it in a more positive way. And more so than anything else, be a part of the answer, not a part of the problem. All right, guys, we here at the Porch love you. We want the best for you. And we want people to glean something from these videos. And if you glean something from it and it helps you any, if you hit the subscribe button, like button, comment, and share, those things would help us in the algorithm. We'd appreciate that. All right, guys, may God bless. Have a good day.